The Xathari were a species renowned for their cold precision, an advanced civilization that had long abandoned emotion in favor of pure logic. Their vast technological empire stretched across countless star systems, yet their core philosophy was ruthlessly simple: only the strong deserved to survive. This principle governed every aspect of their society, from their politics to their biology. On a desolate moon, far removed from the bustling hubs of Xathari trade and power, lay a small, forgotten nursery. The pale silver surface was dotted with eggs, fragile ovals that shimmered faintly under the harsh light of the planet's twin suns. The eggs trembled, cracks forming across their surfaces as the hatchlings inside struggled to break free. They emerged, weak and trembling, their scales dulled and their wings misshapen. To the Xathari, these hatchlings were failures, deviations from genetic perfection. In their eyes, such creatures had no place in their meticulously curated gene pool. The nursery had been abandoned as soon as their flaws were detected, left to become a tomb. It was the way of their kind, a demonstration of mercy, they claimed, sparing resources for the worthy. Dr. Elara Quinn, a human medic stationed on the moon for an unrelated research project, was unprepared for what she stumbled upon that day. The faint hum of life signs on her scanner had led her to the nursery. At first, she thought the readings were a glitch, some artifact of the strange electromagnetic fields in the area. But as she approached, she saw the hatchlings, struggling to breathe, their small bodies writhing against the cold, unyielding ground. Her breath caught in her throat. She'd seen suffering before, on Earth, during wars and natural disasters, but nothing like this. The sight was almost surreal: tiny creatures, barely clinging to life, abandoned in a place devoid of warmth or hope. Her heart ached at the sight, a visceral reaction that no amount of medical training could suppress. The Xathari had to know about this. They were a meticulous people, nothing happened within their domain without their knowledge. That realization only deepened her horror. These creatures had been condemned deliberately, discarded like refuse. Elara knelt beside one of the hatchlings, her hands trembling as she reached out. Its scales were icy to the touch, its breaths shallow. She could see its malformed wings and the faint discoloration of its underbelly, signs of the imperfections the Xathari likely deemed unacceptable. But as the creature weakly lifted its head to meet her gaze, she saw something else: fear, pain, and a desperate will to live. Her instincts took over. She activated her medkit, scanning for injuries and stabilizing the hatchling's vitals. One by one, she moved among them, working tirelessly to provide the most basic care. Her scanner beeped incessantly, warning her of her dwindling supplies, but she ignored it. These weren't just failures. They weren't mistakes. They were lives, fragile and precious. And no matter what the Xathari thought, Elara knew she couldn't walk away. Elara sat on the cold ground of the abandoned nursery, surrounded by the fragile bodies of the hatchlings. Her hands moved with practiced precision, tending to the smallest among them, a creature barely clinging to life. It was weaker than the others, its breaths coming in shallow gasps. She muttered softly, half to herself, half to the tiny dragon, "I'm not letting you go. Not today." The enormity of her decision pressed down on her. Intervening meant breaking Xathari law, a law that carried severe consequences for anyone interfering with what they called natural selection. As a human working under a fragile interspecies agreement, her actions could spark diplomatic consequences. Yet, as she gazed at the hatchlings, she knew she couldn't leave them. The first challenge was obvious: supplies. Her medkit was designed for human emergencies, not alien biology. She improvised, adapting what little she had to stabilize their conditions. Nutrient solutions meant for human patients were diluted and administered carefully, and her field bandages became makeshift wraps for the hatchlings' injuries. She scoured her surroundings for anything useful, collecting fragments of shell and bits of plant life to create a crude shelter from the harsh winds. Despite her efforts, doubt gnawed at her. These creatures were completely alien. She didn't know if her treatments were truly helping or merely prolonging their suffering. What if the Xathari were right? What if she was fighting a losing battle? Her hands faltered as she thought about the repercussions, both for the hatchlings and for herself. She forced herself to focus. One of the hatchlings nuzzled weakly against her hand, its faint warmth breaking through her spiraling thoughts. It wasn't just instinct driving her anymore, it was connection. These creatures were trying to survive, just as any living being would. How could she deny them that chance? Working tirelessly, She began to notice things. The hatchlings responded to her touch, their small bodies trembling less when she held them. Their eyes, though dim, tracked her movements, reflecting a flicker of awareness. She started to see individuality in their behaviors. One was timid, curling up against her side for warmth, while another tried to stand on shaky legs, determined despite its fragility. As the hours passed, exhaustion set in, but Elara refused to stop. She couldn't shake the image of what would happen if she left them. They would die alone, unloved, their potential snuffed out by a society that valued efficiency over compassion. Her anger simmered beneath the surface, directed not only at the Xathari but at the universe for allowing such a fate. Then came the decision that would solidify her path. She activated her communicator, recording a personal log. "This is Dr. Elara Quinn. Against all regulations, I've intervened to save these hatchlings. If anyone hears this, know that I acted because I couldn't stand by and do nothing. These lives matter." Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her resolve was unshakable. There was no turning back now. She would save them, even if it meant facing the full force of the Xathari's judgment. Days turned into weeks, and against all odds, the hatchlings began to thrive under Elara's care. The once frail creatures, who could barely lift their heads, now moved with increasing strength and curiosity. Their scales, dull and lifeless when she found them, began to shimmer with faint iridescence, reflecting the faint light of the moons above. Elara had improvised every step of the way. She rigged her portable generator to create a small heat source, mimicking the warmth they seemed to need to regulate their bodies. Using scraps from her research equipment, she fashioned feeders that delivered nutrient blends she painstakingly adjusted to suit their unique biology. She even modified her medical scanner to better understand their physiology, learning how their hearts beat in rhythm with their wing movements, a detail that helped her treat their respiratory weaknesses. The hatchlings began to bond with her in ways that defied logic. One, which she had nicknamed Ember, followed her tirelessly, chirping softly whenever she moved out of sight. Another, Ash, displayed surprising intelligence, mimicking her gestures when she tried to teach it basic survival tasks. These weren't just animals. They were something more, something sentient. The realization both amazed and terrified her. Her makeshift sanctuary was no secret for long. The Xathari, with their advanced surveillance systems, eventually detected her activities. One morning, her comm device crackled with a sharp, emotionless voice. "Dr. Quinn, you are in violation of Xathari protocol. Cease all interference and surrender the hatchlings immediately." Her stomach churned as she listened. The voice belonged to a Xathari diplomat, one of their enforcers. Their kind was unyielding in the enforcement of their laws, and she knew they wouldn't hesitate to act if she refused. Still, the thought of handing over the hatchlings, now so full of life and trust, was unbearable. The Xathari ship arrived within hours, descending like a silver blade through the atmosphere. Elara stood her ground, shielding the hatchlings as the alien envoy approached. Its elongated frame, glistening with metallic scales, loomed over her. The envoy's voice was devoid of inflection. "You risk much, human, for creatures that were deemed unworthy." "They're alive," Elara said firmly, her voice steady despite her fear. "They're more than alive, they're intelligent. They're worth saving." The envoy tilted its head, a faint sign of curiosity, but its tone remained cold. "Your actions undermine the order of our society. Resources cannot be wasted on imperfection." Elara's anger flared. "Perfection? Is that what you call abandoning children to die? These hatchlings are more than you realize. They're stronger than you think. And if you can't see that, then maybe your perfection is the real flaw." The envoy seemed to hesitate, its gaze shifting to the hatchlings huddled behind her. One of them, Ember, chirped and stepped forward, its scales glowing faintly. For a moment, even the envoy appeared taken aback. "You are irrational," it finally said, though there was an edge of uncertainty in its voice. "We will consult further." As the envoy retreated, Elara knew the battle was far from over. But she also knew she had struck a nerve. For the first time, the Xathari had seen what they had overlooked, life, in its purest form, refusing to be dismissed. Elara's heart raced as the Xathari ship hovered ominously above her sanctuary. She had bought herself time, but it was running out. She activated her emergency beacon, sending a distress signal to the nearest human outpost. It was a desperate move, Humans had limited authority in Xathari-controlled territories, but she had no other choice. Hours passed with no response, the silence gnawing at her resolve. Meanwhile, the hatchlings clung to her side, sensing the tension in the air. Ember, as bold as ever, perched on her shoulder, letting out soft, reassuring chirps. Ash, ever observant, seemed to study her every movement as though trying to anticipate her next action. Their trust was a constant reminder of why she couldn't give up. Finally, her communicator crackled to life. A familiar voice came through, calm yet firm. "This is Captain Davis of the SSV Horizon. We've received your signal, Dr. Quinn. Hold your position. Reinforcements are en route." Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. The Xathari would not wait quietly. Within hours, the human vessel appeared in the sky, its sleek design dwarfed by the Xathari ship. The Xathari envoy returned, flanked by several armed guards. Its voice was colder than before. "Dr. Quinn, this is your last warning. Surrender the hatchlings and stand down, or face the consequences." Captain Davis disembarked, his towering figure a stark contrast to the alien's sleek form. "With all due respect," he began, his tone steely, "you will not lay a hand on those hatchlings. Humanity does not stand by while innocent lives are discarded." The Xathari envoy hesitated, its gaze flickering between Davis and Elara. "This defiance is illogical," it said, though the faintest trace of uncertainty lingered in its voice. "These creatures are anomalies. They hold no value." Elara stepped forward, holding Ember in her arms. The hatchling scales shimmered brighter, casting a soft glow across the barren landscape. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "They have value. They're intelligent, empathetic, and resilient. And they've already proven more adaptable than your rigid system ever could." The envoy seemed momentarily unsettled, its focus locked on the glowing hatchling. As if sensing the tension, Ash joined Ember, letting out a melodic trill that resonated across the field. The sound was otherworldly, carrying a strange, calming energy. Even the Xathari guards seemed momentarily disarmed by the display. "This is unprecedented," the envoy finally said, its voice softer now. "We will require further observation." Captain Davis seized the opportunity. "Then let these hatchlings be a symbol of cooperation. Humanity will take responsibility for their care, and in return, we'll share our findings with your council. Together, we might learn something greater than any one of us could alone." The envoy studied Davis and Elara for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Very well. The council will be informed. But know this, human, this act of defiance will not be forgotten." As the Xathari ship ascended into the sky, Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Captain Davis placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Quinn. Humanity needs more people like you." Later, aboard the Horizon, Elara watched the hatchlings as they explored their new surroundings, their strength and curiosity growing with each passing moment. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time, she saw not just survivors but the potential for something extraordinary. A bridge between species, a chance to redefine what it meant to be worthy of life. As she recorded her final log, her voice carried a quiet determination. "They called it defiance. I call it hope. And sometimes, hope is all you need to change the universe."